Welcome to Think America with Terry Gilberg.
Well, journalists have sure gone wild. Have you noticed amid the cacophony of news stories this past week, there was a tidbit, and we'll talk about it on Think America, about journalists that gave away freebies and perks to the FBI. And what stinks even more is that the FBI took them. Nasty, nasty, nasty. We'll get into it. And it's personal these days. In the aftermath of the cages, babies, and border issue, some members of President Trump's administration and staff were stared down at restaurants, and this has escalated. Are we due for a very, very nasty summer? And hopefully, God forbid, one that we have violence, God forbid? I don't know. Tensions heat up during the summer months. Hello there, Terry here on Think America, where we reason first and then converse. I'm Terry Gilbert, your host. This is America's Town Hall. I'm glad you're on board with us. As you know, if you're a longstanding listener of the program, this is a show with real Americans. You know, we're all real Americans, but not everybody's a broadcaster. I bring in two non-broadcasters into the studio to chew on the hot topics of the day, thought-provoking conversation starters, and we hear what you plural, have to say. And it's wonderful to get different opinions, and we don't scream and holler either. So that's good. Even though it seems like this whole entrance into summer has just been nothing except building, 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 building. We don't want another Steve Scalise baseball game, a tragedy, do we? We don't want another tragedy with Gabby Giffords. I don't know what Maxine Waters thinks she's accomplishing agitating the base, but it can't be good when it continues to escalate. So welcome to the program. We're so glad you're here. I think AmericaRadio.com is the place to find all of our archive shows. You can reach us there. And a shout out to our latest affiliate in Chicago. Tina, welcome to the program. You drew the long straw this week. Nice to have you. She is a research scientist in the area of cancer research. We sure need people like you.
Thank you, and it's nice to be here. So I really appreciate you having me on. And to your point about cancer research, it's something that we've been considering even more, particularly in light of what's going on with John McCain.
Yes, I understand John McCain is hospitalized now. We wish him well. Christine, you are on board. You also drew the long straw. You're a development director for a nonprofit. Welcome to Think America.
Thanks, Terry. So happy to be here.
All right, let's get right to it. I said it was personal. In the aftermath of the cages, babies, and border issues, some members of President Trump's administration and staff were stared down, yelled at, booed out of restaurants, asked to leave, harassed at home. We all know the story now because this past week it's been all through the news. Sarah Sanders, press secretary, and DHS secretary Kirstjen Nielsen were targeted at restaurants. And in Nielsen's case, she was targeted at her own home. Steve Miller, too. So this is escalating. They shouted on the sidewalk of her townhouse, Nielsen's townhouse in Virginia, baby snatcher, and down with Nazis, and so on and so forth. All right, let me start with you, Tina. We've seen this before. Vietnam conflict, I should say, comes to mind. It's shooting the messenger, which is terrible. I remember as the soldiers were coming back from Vietnam, they were spat on. They are the messenger of the federal government's Department of Defense, the Pentagon. All right. They are there doing government work. Same with these two women. Interesting. Maxine Waters is a government employee, too, and she's agitating this. Who's to say somebody might not go off on her?
Well, it's true. And what's so ironic about all this is that it's right out of the Saul Alinsky playbook. You know, start a lot of trouble, harass people that disagree with you, and it's a classic double standard regarding discrimination. And that's what really
What do you mean?
gets to me. So, for example, you have a cake baker in Colorado.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah. So, you know, to me, it's the double standard of discrimination.
Yeah. Do you feel the same way?
Definitely, definitely. If these groups are encouraged by Maxine Waters and many of the Democratic Party are using
She's the worst, though, isn't she?
Oh, yeah. They're using family separation to justify their violent behaviors. This is not new. These things.
You mean the separation? They're using that, all of the caravans that are coming from Central America, and then they're asking for asylum, and that's a very long process. So you're saying they're using that just as the springboard to get into possible violence this summer.
Absolutely.
Well, they use anything, right?
Oh, yeah. Maxine Waters has given Donald Trump the high ground in civility. And, you know.
Well, speaking of Donald Trump, what is your take on the way he agitates? I mean, he's not virgin pure about all of this. You know, he even said on the campaign trail, although I will say he's gotten better in time, being the president, he's more winning this week, right? And we can cite examples. I think my audience already knows how he's won with, Supreme Court, some decisions and so forth, because he put Gorsuch on and all of that. And I don't want to digress too much, but he wasn't virgin pure when he would hit. He would say, somebody would hit me, I'll come and clunk him, right? So he would come back triple hard.
But he's not openly calling for mob violence like Maxine Waters is. She's openly calling for that. She's reacting with emotions, which is what a lot of these people are doing. They're reacting with emotions. So they're not... how
do we quell that, though? Christine, how do we quell that? How do we slow the roll?
People need to understand the rules of communication. The basic rules of communication.
Mobs don't, though.
No,
That's the thing. That's the thing.
They are not... They claim to be the educated elite. They're not.
But they're not willing to be educated. I mean, it's this mob mentality, and that if you disagree with one of them, they're going to get right up in your face. I mean, this is in somebody's private home, which should be their sanctuary.
Well, it's on the sidewalk.
And it's on the sidewalk, but they're outside chanting when you've got family members inside and whatnot. And to me, that is the most despicable part about this, is attacking people in their own homes. Now, granted, Trump may have poked the bear a little bit in the beginning and enticed some of this himself, but this, to me, appears to be a very organized effort.
You think it's Saul
absolutely
Alinsky
do.
stuff.
I think it's Saul Alinsky stuff. I think they're well organized. I think they're well funded. And they have plenty of people in Congress that are willing to help them, including Maxine Waters.
The strange thing, though, is that this can come back and bite other Democrat federal workers, civil servants in the rear end. And it can be very, very dangerous. It's just, I get nervous because now we're into summer. And when the heat rises, people get irritated, and it's no mystery that people get hot under the collar, and then people go off. Anger happens. People grab kitchen utensils and, God forbid, a gun. It was a year ago this past week, that Steve Scalise was shot.
Well,
so they're targeted.
And we're seeing more incidences of people on the street being hit in the head because of their race. We've seen that in New York recently, where a Caucasian woman was walking down the street and got hit by an African-American woman just because of her race. And I'm not saying that that's what's occurring everywhere, but it's this kind of language that produces those acts of violence. And in true liberal form, they don't see consequences, particularly long-term consequences.
Well, and they're willing to sacrifice the puppets. If it's Saul Alinsky puppeteered, for the sake of conversation, they're willing to sacrifice the people in the mobs as their puppet to do the dirty work for the long-term, as you say, consequences. The mob might not see the long-term, but the puppeteers do. Do you agree?
Absolutely. Maxine Waters and her puppets are setting the table for violence just because there's a disagreement on whatever policy it is.
Do you think that people like Dianne Feinstein should grab a microphone and say, "Now wait a minute, this isn't representative of our party"? I mean, look at this past week, what happened in the district in New York with a young socialist woman that beat out a longstanding Democrat. The Dems are in trouble. They are in trouble as a party, and they're in trouble with their messaging. And how they're going to come back after the debacle of Hillary Clinton, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, and even Bernie. When Hillary trounced Bernie, now they've got a millennial coming up to be the next Bernie, and she's a woman. But it's so socialistic. I don't know what they're going to do. I don't know how they're going to form as a party, but I agree. I think that it has to be certain older, seasoned Dems.
The adults on the left
in the room
need to take control and stop cowering and being complicit. They need to cool the rhetoric. They're responsible.
All right. Back to what you were saying, Tina, when you talked about a gay wedding cake. I find it pretty ironic. I'm with you that the same people who might believe that a baker should be compelled to make a gay wedding cake somehow are now perfectly fine with a restaurant refusing to serve Team Trump member. And anybody that's sort of part of that administration, even if they are part of the administration, and they too are deep state. In other words, from the Obama administration, a holdover.
Well, and not only that, we see more stories like this all the time. Just a few weeks ago, there was a man in Indianapolis that walked into a bar and had a rather large crucifix around his neck and was asked to leave because his necklace was too large. And so it's things like that that are happening more often, but they're not happening to people that are of a protected group, let's say, because of their gender or their race or whatever. It's typically happening to somebody that has a more conservative mindset, or they espouse conservative values that are being asked to leave, or they work for the Trump administration, or they have on a Make America Great Again hat that they're not allowing them to wear in a bar. It's those types of things. So I guess to the liberals, that type of discrimination is okay. But if you're a baker and you don't want to bake a cake for a gay couple, then there's something wrong with you.
You know what's interesting about, I agree with what you say, and it's not logical on the left's part. What's interesting is that this past week at the Red Hen restaurant, where Sarah Sanders was asked to leave, and she politely, okay, fine, she held her head up high. Sometimes countering negative speech with more speech is not the smartest thing to do, just no speech. Anyway, she left. She saved her speech for a tweet the next day. But here's the interesting thing. There is backlash. There is backlash. The Red Hen folks, they are getting now the right that used to be polite to come and to picket and to protest in front. And she, the owner and the manager of that restaurant, are feeling the backlash. It used to be that Republicans and conservatives were just too polite, but that is shifting.
Well, I think basically the weakest argument is when you attack the person. That's basic knowledge. You debate when you disagree. There is no debate. There is toxic language. There is demonizing versus debate. What happened to debate? Well, to debate, you have to be intelligent. You have to have an argument that you can back up.
And you have to be able to articulate it. Exactly. I know many intelligent people, but they don't go from the gray matter to the tongue very well. People on the right have become more adept at it, though, I think. There's more. But how do I say it? When I grew up, it was, oh, well, you don't speak until spoken to. Women are seen and not heard. All of this stuff. But it's changing. And the politeness of the conservative, the turning the other cheek philosophy is going a little bit by the wayside. And maybe for the better when it comes to policy. Be more active in the marketplace of ideas and so forth, and in public policy, political philosophy, and how that's executed, as long as it doesn't get over the top and certainly not violent. But I've seen the pushback, and it's working. And, I think the Democrat Party and many of the libs are in serious trouble. All right, let's leave it there. Thanks. We'll be right back. Straight ahead, journos, as in journalists, have gone wild giving away freebies and perks to the FBI. If you don't know this story, stick around. It's a very interesting story. And what is really, really nauseating is the FBI has taken a lot of these perks. I'm Terry Gilbert, ThinkAmericaRadio.com.
Welcome back to Think America with Terry Gilbert.
You may be unaware of it, but journalists gave away freebies and perks to the FBI, and the FBI received them gladly. And why do we know that? Because this is one of the findings from the DOJ's Inspector General's report of about a week and a half ago. The idea of freebies given by journalists to FBI agents, of course, we all would say is bad enough. But what is worse, in fact, it's nauseating to most Americans, is that the FBI took them gladly. So, totally shows in the IG's report that the FBI, in cahoots with certain journalists, all trying to, of course, not get Donald Trump elected and to get Hillary elected and be on that left side, which, of course, is anti their job, of course. Now, it is true that both camps will defend themselves, saying, oh, it's just a few bad apples, a few rogue agents here. And what is FBI head Christopher Wray spoiling all of us with harsher penalties, more strident disciplinary action? Well, that's kind of, in my opinion, that just comes with the territory. I mean, sure, there's a few rogue agents that have done this, but the rogue agents are at the top. And the top has to set the stage. And if the top is getting their hands slapped, as it trickles down to the more middle agents and the lower agents, they're going to feel that sting as well. Don't you agree, Tina? I
do agree. And I'll tell you what really infuriates me about this, and I'm really mad tonight if you can't tell, is that this is...
I don't know you at all, but I can kind of tell.
This is illegal in the pharmaceutical industry. The pharmaceutical industry got busted some years ago for providing gifts of this nature to physicians, and that violated the anti-kickback statute. So what's good for the pharmaceutical industry should be also just as good for the FBI.
The FBI should be better, a higher standard even.
And taking these, in fact, are bribes. Golf outings, drinks, meals, tickets to expensive sporting events. This is exactly what Big Pharma got in trouble with doing, and now they can't do it anymore.
And ironically, I'm sure the FBI looked into that.
Oh, I'm sure.
Don't they get to look into all of this?
Everything.
And then the pot calling the kettle.
Transparency.
But this is even different. This is our government. This is not a corporation. This is not pharmaceuticals. Yeah, that's something that needed to be looked into. But these are people that buy on us, know what's going on in people's lives. It was a horrible abuse of power by the agents. And in my opinion, they should get fired. They should be examples. These are adults, and there are consequences to your actions.
Somebody said to me when they saw Christopher Wray, the new head of the FBI, since Comey's out and McCabe's out, and, these top people are getting fired and maybe charged. So here he sits. Now, I don't have anything against him personally, but the person said to me, "What did you think of Christopher Wray?" And he's sitting right next to Horowitz, the IG, Michael Horowitz. And Horowitz has this 500-page detail about, some FBI, and now you're the new guy. And so what Christopher Wray chose to do is kind of say, not on my watch, and you're right, and you crack the whip, and everybody's got to shape up, and a few bad apples, but everybody feels the sting, and et cetera, et cetera. And this friend of mine said, I had to laugh. She said, "That is a crock. That's a bunch of BS. How dare he say that? He's pissing on my boots and telling me it's rain." And I just went, oh, wow. She did not like that. She said that man is passing the buck. He's another Comey. Now, I did not have that visceral response, but that is an American who's sitting there and wants this guy to come in and say, "The buck stops here. You will not do this. Everybody, blah, blah, blah." And he kind of played a half measure, is what she thought.
He's a beta male. I mean, how many beta male do we have? We've got Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan. It's the beta male club. And to Christine's point earlier, Wait a minute.
Yeah. Mitch McConnell, Paul Ryan, and Christopher Wray.
Yes.
Where would you put Michael Horowitz?
I would also put him in the beta male.
He's a beta male.
Yeah, he is. Competing with the alpha male of Trump. Come on.
I guess they are.
I
hadn't thought of it. I know they do these half measures. Would you agree with my friend pissing on my boots and telling me it's rain?
Absolutely. And I think people are starting to wake up. And to Christine's point earlier about FBI agents receiving these gifts, they do spy on us. They know everything about us. And if you can essentially bribe them with sports event tickets to get some information, what would happen if the Russians were to interview them?
Oh, I mean, it just stinks. It's just awful.
It's sickening.
It's just awful. And to think that this is where we're at with the FBI, and then they want, the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I mean, the credibility is completely shot. I didn't have that reaction to Christopher Wray. I thought he was being a little politico because, there he said, he's the head of this department and he's talking to the House and the Senate. What was your reaction?
Well, I bring it back to they sought those journalists out. They sought them out to leak it.
So bad.
We can look at it another way too. We can look at it from a journalistic perspective. Journalism is supposed to be
neutral,
nonpartisan. I consider it a bit of journalistic malpractice, which we see in almost every news.
I know. When did all this happen? You know, people have asked me on that point. People have asked me, do you think journalists need a license? And I'm at the point where I'm about ready to say yes. And we don't have a license. All we have is credibility. And, you know, it's so shot. It's so shot. It's so partisan. We need to break. Thanks so much for that. Straight ahead, my interview with Jim Bay, author of Miracle on Hammertown Road and the winner of the 2017 Hollywood Book Festival, spiritual category. You won't want to miss it.
Welcome back to Think America with Terry Gilbert.
I'm excited to take my next segment in the direction of the spiritual. And I'm excited to introduce you now to Jim Bay. Some folks call him Bubba Bay. That's his nickname. He's the author of a wonderful paperback called Miracle on Hammertown Road. He's also the winner of the 2017 Hollywood Book Festival in the Spiritual Category Award. And why? Because Jim had a life-altering experience. He had a near-death experience, and it led him to a very different outlook on life. And since we've been talking a bit about the deaths of Kate Spade and Anthony Bourdain and also the issue of suicide in general, he has much to say about life and death. Jim, welcome to Think America radio show with Terry Gilbert. Hello.
Hello. Thanks, Terry. Thanks for having me.
Well, I am delighted that you're doing media. You told me in the pre-interview you're a humble, simple man, and you had a dramatic, life-altering, magnificent experience when you took a very bad fall, and it turned out to be a near-death experience. Take us through that, will you?
Yeah, sure. I went for a walk. I normally don't walk near my house. I usually walk in town, but I was just going out for a breath of fresh air, and I know I don't walk down that way. And to make a long story short, my house was on a dead-end road. I rent from my brother, and I went down past my house. It wasn't my plan, but I still didn't feel well, and I turned around and I was heading back home when I felt a little better, and I saw some car lights coming off the hill. So the next thing you know, when I walk at night like that, I try to get off the road and then stop. So, nothing happens. It gives them time to stop or whatever.
Uh-huh.
So anyway, I got off to the side of the road, and next thing I know, I was stumbling, and next thing I know, I was flying through the air. And the next thing I know, I landed on my head, and it ended up being like 14 feet, drop, and I landed on my head first, and then I landed on my left shoulder, my left rib area, and then my left legs, and I was unconscious for a little while. I don't know how long, because after all that happens, time kind of, I don't know, it's not necessarily stand still, but It just becomes irrelevant in a way, So then I woke up and I was bleeding. I ended up having a 4.5-inch crack in my head. So I was bleeding and everything like that. And
I remember you telling me, too, that you broke 11 ribs, 10 vertebrae, your skull. You just mentioned your skull and your left scapula.
Right, correct.
That's a lot of bones, something like 25 bones or something, right?
Well, yeah, it ended up being 20. It's 23 bones with 26 fractures. Because
wow.
I broke C7 two ways, and I broke two of T1 to T12. I broke 9 of those, and 2 of those I broke 2 ways.
All right, so take us then. Now you're bleeding, but you managed to move along to get help, and then you had this near-death experience, correct?
Correct. Yeah. Well, I woke up, and make a long story short, I had 2 kids that passed away before this accident, and then my one son, my ex-wife, found them dead in his apartment 3 or 4 days. So you can imagine what she found. So when I realized I was hurt really bad, I thought, I don't know, it's just always the way I've been. I thought if I could get to where I came from, not necessarily, to live, but I actually moved to the road to die, just people would find me in the morning and bury me. Because that was my hope, I was in so much pain and so much blood loss. And so I finally was able to figure out I came from this big wall side, and so I ended up, people can't believe it, I actually climbed out of this culvert with all that fractures and stuff, and I got to near the road, and I laid in this log, and I was content and dying. So, I was, as content as I could be. I mean, right. There was no hope or nothing left in me, and, so that's what I thought was going to happen.
And so now while you're on the log is when I believe your book, you talked about the white light. And that's code for other. That's a description kind of code. When people say I saw the white light, it kind of means in the vernacular now you're going to meet your maker.
Yeah, that's what I ended up. It got real beautiful and everything like that. And my friend wrote the book with me, and it ended up being a great way to describe it because I had my eyes closed. I thought I was going to die, so I closed my eyes. And then, like all of us as kids, you oversleep and your parents turn your lights on in your room and say, got to get up.
Right.
Something like that. And the lights, they burn the outside of your eyes. That's what happened to me. And I woke up, I opened my eyes, and next thing I know, I saw this figure walking towards me. And with this figure was two of my kids who passed away, were there too. And the reason why this light came as a figure is, to be honest with you, before I fell and all this changed my life, I would have never known if it was just a light or if it was an orb or anything like that. I would have never known.
But you're telling me and this listening audience that you saw in some spiritual form your children with a figure. What did the figure look like?
Well, for me, it was grandfatherly and stuff like that.
Uh-huh.
Had a robe and
Really?
And I and I, like in the book, I only describe so much because I still believe that everybody could see something different, and I believe it's not my job to say this is how he looks like, because I believe you might see something different, and I believe everybody in the world would see something different.
Well, not only that, Jim, people remember archetypal ideas. If someone says, well, he kind of looked like Santa Claus, we already know Santa Claus, right? We already have that idea. Right. All right, go ahead.
Right.
Did the figure speak to you? Did the figure call you? Or say, stay where you are, you got more living to do?
Well, basically, that's what happened. At first, I thought, I didn't know. I thought I did enough to go to heaven. And if you believe in heaven, I didn't, believe in heaven and stuff. And so I thought this is how you get taken to heaven. I didn't know. I'd never been there before, And so,
neither me.
I had no idea, And so anyway, we ended up having a conversation. And one of the big things in the that I shared in the book and all that is if you have a big major question in your life and you always question it, and then you meet God and then you would think he would answer it for you. Well, my big question is the Bible. I didn't know the Bible before I fell, and the reason why I didn't know the Bible is I kept saying to myself, well, if it's really God's words, why does all this killing happen over it?
Uh-huh.
So that was my main reason why I was a believer. I called myself a Christian. I went to church on Christmas and Easter, and other than that, I didn't go, at all. And I always believed all these stories. I wasn't humble. I wasn't gullible. I just believed there was always there was always a catch that all these stories, they really happened, these events and stuff. So anyway, when we had our conversation, he let me know that the Bible is his word, And,
did you hear a voice? Did you hear direction? Or did you feel that you were going to be okay and there was new purpose because it wasn't your time yet?
I kind of heard, voice within, kind of like, communication, but it was clear. It was definitely clear, and it was telling me, do I notice the people who did the killings, most of them aren't in power no more when people take the Bible, out of its context and, make it for themselves. Yeah, they might be in power for a while, but then they go away, and yet God and the Bible still stand, test of time kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then in the end, we hit, and it was a brief, I don't know how long, again, time-wise, but it would be like me, you walk on the street, meeting each other, talking. I never told, and that's the one thing that people actually have been liking about my testimony and everything like that is one, it was a brief meeting. Two, I didn't go to heaven. I didn't leave Earth. It all happened on, and I didn't die. I didn't go and leave my body. It all happened within my body, and it was just a.
And you don't, and you do not believe you were merely hallucinating because of pain.
No,
this was different. This was different.
Yeah, this was different. And how it was different is, it was pitch black where I was, and why God was there, I was able to see. Those logs that lose their bark and branches, and they're hard on the outside, soft on the inside. They're like old telephone poles.
Mm-hmm.
Well, why God was there, I was able to see what I was laying on, and so I remembered that, and I talked to him, and I was able to see enough of it that it was no bark, no branches.
Because this light that was there was shining on the log where you were bleeding?
Correct.
Wow.
And so anyway, so then after God did tell me I had things to do for him, but he didn't tell me what to do after. This people can't even believe this much. After he left, and my kid, and all that, he didn't tell me what to do. Well, I know it's symbolic, but I actually looked up through all the blood on my face and all that, and I was able to see this little tiny light inside a house. And I said, well, that's where I got to go. And then people can't believe, because when I was in a coma in a hospital, they thought I crawled to this house, but I actually got up and walked.
That's remarkable. We're down to a minute, Jim, and I hate to cut this short, but tell me, and you survived, and your book is Miracle on Hammertown Road. Tell me quickly what your thoughts are on Anthony Bourdain and Kate Spade, who instead took their life at their own hand.
Yeah, well,
Quickly.
I just don't, I don't understand, I'm unfortunately it's a sad thing, because every time you go, there's people that are trying to, that have these things and are trying to get back to live like me. I had all that, and I did think about it when you're in that much pain and everything like that. You're like, oh, I might as well go. But, there's always a reason to live as far as I'm concerned. You give your best and you try your best. And it's sad that they, took the life the way they did. It's just sad. And the thing that, gets me is that people see them and they look like they have everything. And so when they take their life, now you got people who think they don't have everything, and it makes them think about doing it easier and more. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, they're an example for those who are vulnerable to do it. We need to leave it there, but I'd like to have you back, and we can continue on with your fascinating story. All right, Jim?
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks, Terry.
Very good. Jim Bay, Miracle on Hammertown Road. I'll be right back.
Welcome back to Think America with Terry Gilberg.
We'll get Terry's talkers, my guests here, my real people on the program, as we say, non-broadcasters, in our town hall, their reaction. I will have him back. I'll have my producers give him a call, and we'll carry on. We kind of ran out of time, but this is quite the read. And Jim Bay is a landscaper, and like he told me when I called him about his book, he said, I'm just a real average Joe, and this happened to me, and it was life-changing, so remarkable. And in the pre-interview, I must say, we got into issues of faith and are Americans in general faith-filled people anymore? What do we think about these famous people who take their own life? Maybe there's mental illness, and we don't know what's going on in their minds and indeed in their lives. We know about them, but we don't walk in their shoes. So we got into so many things. A very interesting, believable, humble person. I like him very much, and you'll like his book. All right, Tina, what was your reaction?
I thought that was one of the most powerful messages I've ever heard. And truly, because it was the way that he told the story, and that it was his own story, but he had the foresight enough to say, this may not be your experience. This is what happened to me. And he truly is a miracle, having all of those injuries, including a coma.
Well, you're in science, so you must know something about anatomy,
and
clearly.
Damaging his vertebrae such that he did. It's a miracle he's still walking around by the grace of God. So I would say that God's messengers come in different packages, and I'm sure
he gets out of that ravine and walks.
It's a miracle.
And walks.
In that condition.
And then, of course, he's in a coma when he's in a hospital.
And then today, having the ability to not only remember, but to complete a book and to speak in an articulate fashion, he truly is a miracle. And what a great story.
What a purpose he has. And that's why I was drawn to the book, and I said, well, you got to come on my national radio show.
Yeah, and I loved how he talked about how there was a question, if there was a question in your life, and he had a question in his life. He didn't say he actually asked God the question. He said God kind of knew that he was questioning the Bible, and God answered his question without really a conversation. It was just kind of God
innate
knew.
Or a feeling or just
and
that
he said,
sense.
Everybody has a different question. Or maybe
I got plenty.
And that's what he talked about that, and I just thought, what a amazingly humble man, and what a gift.
Wouldn't you like to have a beer with this guy?
Yeah,
absolutely.
I would I could hang out with him all day and listen
Get the pictures going. I want to hear this more. That's why I'll have him back. What is your take, both of you, about a life and death vis-a-vis the other major news story of 2 weeks ago with Anthony Bourdain and, of course, Kate Spade?
I think people that are touched by depression or sadness, typically when they take their own lives, just don't seem to be all there. They're in true despair. And I think Jim's message speaks volumes in that, yeah, you're going to have hard days, but God has a purpose for you being here. And it's just truly sad, and that level of despair for somebody to feel that they have no reason to live is just tragic.
And I think sometimes, I believe it was Kate Spade, she, don't quote me on this, but I believe that there was medication involved. And sometimes when they do not get those dosages right, those medications can actually make you kill yourself.
It's worse.
You're not thinking.
Did it ever come out in the news? I guess it did, but in a more minor way, because we live bombarded by news all the time. My goodness. But I think it came out that she was diagnosed bipolar.
She was.
Isn't that right? Yep. But not so with Anthony Bourdain. Anthony was more, well, one person said this of him, and it wasn't nice. And I kind of shriveled back a little bit and bit my tongue. Said, no, he was very hedonistic. Now, I would never use that with Anthony. I would never. I don't know him. He lived for the moment, clearly. And here's a man that had all the carnal pleasures. I mean, look at the trips he got to go on and the wonderful meals and the fellowship and yet maybe didn't believe that there was a higher purpose for his life, which is interesting because Jim Bay kind of alluded to that. But as to Kate Spade, I think there was mental illness. I think. I never met either of them. May they be both of them with their maker. Straight ahead, artificial intelligence, that AI that's so much a part of our lives, on Think America with Terry Gilbert.
Welcome back to Think America with Terry Gilbert.
The artificial intelligence technology of, here we go, facial recognition. That is out and about all over the place, cameras everywhere. It takes your picture here and there. Anyway, what we're going to talk about now is whether or not it's benign or malignant. And I say it depends on your point of view. It is just another tool. Just like so many tools we have at our disposal in a modern world, it depends on how you use it. It certainly goes further than tagging option in Facebook, as we know, because Amazon and Google and Microsoft, they all sell face recognition software, and they do it to the Department of the Defense, to ICE, to Homeland Security, and other agencies in the name of national security. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Well, think about it this way. On the one hand, facial recognition can be used to stop a would-be terrorist at customs, for example, and it can be used as well to invade your privacy. If the government uses it to surveil a protest, for example, you, the innocent person at that country music concert, can be in the government's database. And you can possibly, as a result of that, be flagged as a terrorist because you were at the concert where a terrorist is spotted and maybe does terrible criminal action. So, what's your take, Christine, on technology? Do you like facial recognition? Is it an invasion? Do you think we need it? This is a tough one, I think.
It is
a real
tough one.
toughie.
I was speaking with a couple of millennials about this one, and they seem to think with the internet, it's inevitable. Your information is out there. We need that for security. That's one of the only ways for security. You know, we've got the fingerprint, but the facial recognition, they seem to think that it comes with the package.
It comes with living in a modern society.
Exactly.
I think
you're
they're
off
right.
The grid.
I think unless you're off the grid, who can be off the grid almost, right? Unless you're, I don't know, somewhere in Montana and you're a Unabomber.
And or you're elderly.
And then you're still found after about 15 years. I think they're right. So we live with it, right? Mm-hmm. And we're in databases, and that's the way it goes.
I travel a lot, and so I think having facial recognition would streamline the process within an airport to designate a standard passenger from a terrorist. But I do have real issues as far as, losing your freedoms with this. Because, again, we're entrusting this to the DOJ and the FBI that don't have a stellar reputation right now. So to your point earlier, What if you're at a protest and they flag you as a terrorist because of facial recognition? What then? You're not on the no-fly list after that?
Well, you're not supposed to be. Look, they've got to have probable cause and all of that, and they have to, but we can march down that road. You make a very astute point. Indeed.
Well, we've been through this before with when we first found out that they had cameras at every intersection in the cities. And I remember going to New York City after finding out about that and staring up at every corner, wondering what they're doing with my information.
Well, look at CCTV. London is full of cameras of CCTV. Yes. Munich, Paris, on it goes. And so for safety and security, it certainly helps. So, you're on candid camera, so you better keep your nose clean, right?
Absolutely.
All right, let's leave that. We got to wrap up the show. At this time on the show, we always have a segment that leaves our show, we end our show, rather, on a high note, or we attempt to. This is Change Your Life Technology segment, and I want to just tell you briefly about a new blood clot removal technology that is safer and faster. I don't know if you realize it, but about 1 million people experience heart attacks annually. And about 375,000 of these are caused by huge blood clots. 200,000 other patients suffer from blood clots in certain peripheral arteries, but the big ones, the big number, 375, is in the coronary vessels. And such clots can be eliminated through a process known as thrombectomy. You probably know about that, right, Tina? Because you're in science. Anyway, there are shortcomings to that, and there's some major disadvantages with some of the machines that do this because they often leave 30% or sometimes as much as 50% of the clot as residue. So, what to do? There are advances in the removal of blood clots technology that has brought about new innovation. There is something called the MegaVac mechanical thrombectomy. I think I'm saying that right, system. The MegaVac mechanical thrombectomy system. And this completely removes the blood clots in arteries. It protects against embolization, distal embolization. It acts as an anchor to other devices, and it carries out blood clot removal quite rapidly. So for the millions of people who are at extreme risk of death with blood clots, this is new technology for you, and lest I not say a welcome relief. I'm very interested in this, and you can find more about it on our website, thinkamericaradio.com. That's it for this edition, this hour of Think America Radio. We want to say thank you to Christine. We want to say thank you to Tina. And our moniker for leaving the show always is reason first,
and then converse.
I always have my talkers say that to take us out. Thanks so much. We'll see you next time. I'm Terry Gilberg.
Welcome to Think America with Terry Gilberg.
Have you ever heard of this term wokeness, this word? What level of wokeness are you? The question doesn't ask how aware are you at any given time. Instead, it is a measurable state of awareness. So says the PC police. Now, I really think that the PC police should write the new Webster's Dictionary. They've got words and phraseology. Anyway, we'll get into it on the program. I'll also be interviewing an activist for abused children and a survivor of the FLDS cult. She'll be with us. Plus, we'll talk about whether or not you can legislate good character. Hello there, Terry here. This is Think America, where we reason first and then converse. This is America's Town Hall. I bring in non-broadcasters around the microphone to chew on thought-provoking conversation starters on all things Americana. We are America's Town Hall, so welcome to it. I want to introduce you to Tina. Tina is with us. Tina is a scientist, and she is a research scientist in the area of cancer and cancer drugs. Welcome to the program. Nice to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Are you this close to a cure for cancer? And if so, what type of cancer?
I wouldn't say we're that close, but we're getting there. Cancer is one of those devious diseases that changes very rapidly as far as the
What
genetics.
is your specialty in cancer research?
So primarily I've been looking at brain tumors.
Oh, really? Oh, we got a brainiac on the show. Well, welcome to
Thank
the
you.
show. Anything that has to do with science, I'll just let you take over the mic. And Christine. Christine is a development director for nonprofit. I love it when people work for nonprofit. It has heart and soul. Welcome to the show. Nice to have you,
Thanks
Christine.
for having me, Terry.
All right, let's get right to it. Ladies' Night, Ladies' Day. This one, a lot of people might not know about, but it's huge, as President Trump would say. Are you a volunteer for the Space Force? Now, what the heck is the Space Force? Well, it's the 6th branch of the U.S. military. Presently, President Trump, believe it or not, wants the United States to dominate the new frontier of space. He has directed the Pentagon and the DOD to pursue what it takes. Now, that is one tall order, and I would say that is far out. Wow, that is far out. All right, by doing so, we might, he believes, be able to prevent our enemies from taking out our pre-established satellites, which, of course, would be good defense. But here's the other side. According to the 1967 Outer Space Treaty, which I didn't know much about until I started researching this, it was signed by 87 countries in 1967. Any nation that would place a WMD in Earth's orbit would be in violation of the treaty. And more currently, Russia has already stated that they would have a very tough response to a U.S. Space Force. So let me start, Tina, with you. Do you applaud this? Do you think it is too far out? I think it's far out.
I think it's kind of groovy.
All right. Okay. Feeling groovy.
And I keep getting this visual of pigs in space from the Muppet Show.
Pigs in space I don't have that visual. I'm sorry, from the Muppet Show.
Yeah, Space Force.
I get Star Wars going on, but all right. What do you think?
I think the 1967 treaty is outdated. And things have advanced such that I think it would be important if we had some type of presence in space beyond what we have now, because I think that is not only the final frontier, but the next frontier. I mean, we're concerned about electromagnetic fields. We're concerned about protecting the grid. So I think that would give an opportunity just to have those types of weapons in there. So I think we need to do whatever we can to protect ourselves. And it might actually lead to some diplomacy with good old Vladimir.
But then the question is, Star Wars is a movie. We don't have Star Wars right now. This is a military thing. It's like off we go into the wild blue yonder. That's the U.S. Air Force. We would need to create a brand new song or another refrain. And would it fall under the Air Force? No, it would not, because Trump wants it to be the 6th branch. But it's militaristic. Are we fighting in space? I mean, I thought we kind of dominated already, and we don't have an enemy up there.
Yeah, at first I thought, boy, is this the best use of our resources?
I agree.
Is this what we were supposed to do? But then I read a little bit more, and I learned a little bit more about Russia and China and their operations in space. And I'm very happy about what Trump is doing to bolster our military. And I think this does kind of fall under the same umbrella. Although I did think that the Air Force was handling this. Apparently, they do not want to handle it.
Well, part of that is DOD Mattis. Mm-hmm. He's given a thumbs down to something called the Space Corps. Yes. Now, there's a little history here. My audience might not know this, but let me just cut to the chase. The Marine Corps falls under the U.S. Navy. Yes. The Space Corps that was brought up in a legislative bill not too long ago and then was nixed, it didn't pass, was a minor corps, also military, but very minor, that would fall under the United States Air Force, akin to how the Marine Corps falls under the Navy. But at the top of all of the Joint Chiefs and the Department of Defense, we have Secretary Mattis. And Mattis's job, so he said, listen, we don't have the resources for this. I'm trying to trim the fat as it is. Wars are expensive. We don't even have peace on earth. I'm paraphrasing.
But what Tina talked about with the diplomacy, maybe there's an opportunity.
Well, there might be. There might be. But right, for him to give thumbs down on the Space Corps and then have Trump say, look into the Space Force. Well, eyes roll back. His eyes were starting to roll back. Oh, my God, no. So it didn't help that he wasn't the wind beneath Trump's wings on all of this. And, of course, he rallies all the Joint Chiefs and says, what do you need? And they are trying to look at budgets, right? Because there's a tremendous waste in the military. So my question is, do we need to be militaristic, I guess? What's wrong with more money going into the International Space Station? And I looked into this, too. The International Space Station, they got some funding issues. They're trying to zero fund out by 2025 so that private enterprise, the Elon Musks of the world, will take over. Right now, they're doing transactions with public relationships with private enterprise. So I'm bothered by this for financial reasons and for definition. Are we fighting Russia and China already? That's news to me. Is it fighting? Are we in war?
I view this sort of as Reagan did with Star Wars, and there were a couple of other programs that were put on hold that were designed to protect the electrical grid. And I think...
Valid point. Yeah. I didn't mean to undermine your point on that.
I don't think it's out of the question that we would be attacked potentially using satellites that could damage our electrical grid. I think that's definitely on the horizon with North Korea and even Russia and China. But I'm not sure if a Space Force would actually be the answer because, again, to your point, it sounds very military-ish. But we have to have some kind of preparation because they are sending up satellites that have the potential to harm us. And we've had things put on hold.
Well, then what should have fallen? Should it be more funding? I'm not opposed to defending ourselves in outer space. Don't get me wrong. I just don't know how this is going to define. Should we have it through NASA? And if so, let's start bolstering up NASA more. The idea of this Space Force, and President Trump was animate. He wants higher, onward, upward to have an American dominance in space. And that is pricey.
And that's the limit. I mean, that is the limit. There's nothing past that. So he would be.
In other words, it doesn't have a limit.
Exactly.
Okay.
So it's.
The sky is the limit.
Exactly.
Space is the limit.
Space is the limit.
But I think you could get more money if you had William Shatner do a public service announcement for NASA talking about the benefits of such a program. So,
well, look at how landing a man on the moon was marketed and messengered.
Yes.
It's all in the messaging. And this, I think, with all the news, look at President Trump is on Twitter every day. He grabs the headlines. He is the news every dang day. So because of that, he controls the news cycle. So if you wanted to roll this out, I would say it didn't get rolled out with aplomb. It got rolled out and kind of bombed. And therefore, it's confusing. And I read news all day long. I didn't quite get the idea of dominating space, but making it militaristic to the point where we've got the Joint Chiefs looking at their budgets and Mattis going, I don't think so, thumbs down, even to a core, not a force, a core. That didn't roll out well.
It didn't. And, the other thing to give President Trump the benefit of the doubt here is that maybe he has some information that we aren't privy to.
Yes.
That he's trying to prepare.
Perhaps.
There a threat we don't know that there's something we may not know of.
Well, and it also goes, let's just slow the roll a little bit. It also goes to priorities. What are we about? Are we about working for peace on earth and good diplomacy? There's going to be, I suppose, a summit with Putin coming up. We're still looking with our satellites at where all of the nukes are in North Korea, and we've just been chapter 1 with North Korea, and the summit was successful, but we ain't got nothing yet on all of that. Where are our priorities? What are we meant to do when it comes to defense? We talk on the one hand, we're a sovereign nation on our borders and bring everything back to America. It's just the United States and America's good first. And then all of a sudden we're in outer space. There's times when I think that we need to rethink the messaging. What is the purpose? What are we all about? Do we need a sixth military force when we don't even have peace on earth yet? And our troops aren't home from Afghanistan, the longest war the U.S. military's ever been involved in. I mean, hello?
And again, it's a tough one because Russia and China are putting billions of dollars already into whatever they're doing up in space. We've got to keep up.
Do you think, then, since we're talking about being first and keeping up, maybe this is just messaging? Maybe that's all it is.
It could very well be.
That caught you by surprise.
It did. I mean, that it's a head fake, that maybe we do know what they're up to. And you know how Trump is. He'll throw out ideas, and then everybody thinks tomorrow he's going to launch something. It's like, no, he's a CEO. That's what you do. You throw out ideas, you get people's thoughts, you think about it. But to your point, I didn't think about that. It could be a
and you get a national radio show talking about it, that's for sure, amid all the other headlines that we could be talking about.
Mm-hmm. You see the reactions.
See the reactions.
Yeah.
Maybe even get some ideas as he listens to this show and other shows.
Well, he's a very antsy guy. He's kind of a human pogo stick. Man, he's on Air Force One here. He's over there. He never sleeps. He works all the time. And he's what? Is he 72? 73 years old? I mean, this guy. And half the time, he himself, though he moves fast, doesn't even keep up with all of his ideas. So maybe this is, and he knows how to play the media, my goodness, and he's a consummate showboater. So maybe this is a bit of a head fake. I still think it's pretty far out. It will take years to do, tons and tons of money to the taxpayer. And I say, Mr. President, come down to earth. That's what I say, okay? All right, straight ahead. What is wokeness? And what level of wokeness are you? We'll explain. We'll have a little dictionary time here on this word on Think America. Reason first, then converse. Glad you're with us.
Welcome back to Think America with Terry Gilbert.
All right, here's one for you, Christine. The level of wokeness. What level are you? Now, don't get stumped on this. The question doesn't ask how aware you are at any given time. Instead, it's this, what they call the new measurable state of awareness about happenings in the world. In other words, are you hip? Are you into the current events? Do you side with the PC police? A level of wokeness can be used to pressure businesses to pull their advertising if the advertiser is not fully woke to the trends by the speech police. In other words, are you into the current leftist trend? This measure is very useful in pinpointing individuals or corporations who don't fall in line with social justice constructs of the moment, which is very subjective, of course. I don't ever like the word social justice. I actually wrote a little talk about this one time. Social justice, just as an aside, implies there's injustice, or why would you need the social justice? So then you have to ask the question, well, who's the victim of the injustice? Well, that depends on which side you're on. So they're all automatically setting up victimhood. But I digress. Do you have a level of wokeness? Are you hip? Are you, as an American working for a nonprofit, are you on the side that the PC police would agree with?
You know, it seems like it's the new coolness, there's a hashtag and there's something for every single way of thinking. And unfortunately, if you don't agree, it doesn't mean you're a hater. You just
they would say you're a hater.
But you are. But yeah, that's
they
exactly
would say you're a hater. You need to be on our side, whatever that means. It's some social justice cause. It's always leftist. And they've created now this word wokeness. What level of wokeness? So you're a hater. I can tell right away. You're a hater. Even though you got a beautiful smile and you're laughing. You're a hater. Are you a hater?
I'm not a hater, but I am a deplorable.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
are you a woke deplorable or are you an asleep deplorable?
I'm probably asleep on this arbitrary scale of
wokeness.
Of wokeness, of somebody being judgmental. Again, if you're not with the liberal cause, then clearly you're not woke.
That's right. That's what they want you to think. So it's used as a way to socially engineer the end of a career. For example, pressure corporations to pull advertisers from businesses that are not fully woke or awoken to coming into this new thing, this new sea change, this new culture, this new whatever it is that they want. The question is it a legitimate way to establish parameters, how an individual should behave or a corporation is labeled, etc.? The problem with stuff like this is that it's arbitrary. It's not in our vernacular. It's not in our culture presently, but it's a way to have a sea change, to move conversations in a different direction. I remember with gay activists a long time ago usurping the word gay, and now it's in the vernacular. This social justice term, I just told you what I don't like about it. When you have an injustice, legitimate injustice, it assumes there's a victim. But if they own the topic, then it's their victims that are victims. Yep. For example, in immigration, never mind that people run across the border and traipse on federal land, which is owned by the American people, private land where cattle graze and there's chickens. Oh, no. They're the ones who are victimized. Never mind that fencing gets trashed and that farmer near the border has to put up new fencing and get his cows back or his chickens back or just the expense of a new fence. He's not the victim, you see, because they own the social justice topic and the terminology.
Well, and that's part of what Christine said earlier about the coolness factor. And this is what happens when you get out-of-touch millennials in the workplace. I mean, in corporate America, you've got the Myers-Briggs test now and all these other validated tools to measure your personality and how well you get along with others. I'm waiting for something like this to be introduced at a corporate meeting in-house to not only judge how cool
you mean in the
you
scientific world?
In the corporate business world in general, because that's really what they want to go to. It's like Starbucks on steroids in that sense.
Absolutely. And, it brings us back to Jack the Baker as well. That was just a complete bullying exposition. And, liberals are talking about how, bullying is such a
verboten, awful.
All these things are happening with bullying. Well, you can kind of trace a lot of that bullying back to people not agreeing to disagree, which is a constant theme here that we've been talking about. You need to debate issues. You can debate. You can agree to disagree. Not everybody is going to think the way you are. That's why we're all individual. We're unique. We're individuals. We're able to think and make up our own minds. I don't want the thought police. I don't want this 1984-ish right thought, wrong thought type of thing kind of hovering over me. It's like a
it's interesting too, to your point, fully woke. When you take the word awake, there's a progressive element to it. There's an enlightened sense of it. If you're awake, you're more mindful, right? You're more of a thought-provoking person. You're more enlightened. Maybe you're the Buddha, for God's sake. You're seeing the light. You're just more developed spiritually. And that's by choice. So to take a word like that and then tell corporations you're not fully woke to the issue, that's how they control the issue. Interesting, huh? Yeah. Okay, straight ahead, my interview with author and survivor of a fundamentalist Latter-day Saints cult. She's also an activist for abused children. After years of abuse, she is on the program with us, and she's giving us an update about her activism. Straight ahead.
Welcome back to Think America with Terry Gilberg.
Many, many years ago, I interviewed Flora Jessup, and she's back with us on Think America, this national show. She's the author and survivor. She's an author and a survivor of the FLDS cult. She is currently an activist for abused children. And you might know, in case you don't know her name, because she's pretty iconic at this point, you might remember that after years of abuse and being impregnated by her father, she was forced to marry her first cousin, but then managed finally to escape the fundamentalist Latter-day Saints community of Colorado City out in northern Arizona. And she also helped her sister Rudy, too, after Warren Jeffs, who's now imprisoned, officiated at Rudy's wedding. She is Flora Jessup, the author of Church of Lies, and I've asked her to come on the program with her insights about the Me Too movement. Hello, Flora.
Hi, how are you?
Just fine, and I'm delighted that you're with us. All right, you
Thanks
heard.
for having me.
Well, you bet. And I really am glad that you agreed to another interview. Many years ago, I interviewed you when you were really pushing hard, being almost a single activist against the abuse that children in the cult of FLDS were experiencing, you yourself. So I'm really interested to hear what you have to say, your insights about the Me Too movement. I think, and I'm guessing here, that you'll say a little too late. What say you?
Absolutely. You know, I am all about the victims who come forward and use their voice. And it's important to do that because by staying silent, we allow more victims to be created. So with this Me Too movement, it's frustrating because you've got women that are powerful women that had a platform that was very, very powerful that could have reached so much support for victims. And instead they stayed silent, and now they're coming forward and want to play the victim. And it's not okay when you have so many victims that do come forward that don't have that platform.
Well, you say powerful, but let me just give one example. And I think the statute has run with her relationship with Harvey Weinstein, but the example that comes to mind is Gwyneth Paltrow. Now, at the time when she was experiencing intense harassment by Harvey Weinstein, to the point with sign on the dotted line, I'll put you in my movies if you come and visit me in my penthouse suite at the Beverly Hills Hotel. At the time, Flora, she wouldn't say she was powerful. She wasn't yet a mainstream number one lead actress, type A actress, up there with Meryl Streep. So and the culture of the casting couch made women not powerful. Now, I agree with you wholeheartedly in how powerful you were with such courage going up against a cult and, in fact, members of your family and escaping all of that. But there are women like Gwyneth and others that are speaking out now because it takes time for this sea change to occur in our culture, our American culture, as women have progressed through all of this. So what would you say about how powerful or not powerful they were in their own environment?
You know, having power, I'm not talking about notoriety. I'm talking about education. I'm talking about a period in our history back in the 80s when women were finding their voice. They knew they had the right to speak up, and yet they didn't. Mm-hmm. It's not like they were children, like so many victims are. We're talking adult women, the majority of which, or nearly adult women, who had power in the fact that they were not children. They had a voice. They knew how to use their voice. They were out seeking careers. So I'm not talking about notoriety when I say power. I'm talking about the power of being an individual. And
you're talking about courage, something you have, and other women don't have that the way you do. You're talking about backbone. So let me give a different example. All of the women that Bill Clinton hit on, and in some cases, those women said, I was raped. I was raped. I was sexually abused. I was hit on. I was harassed. And they spoke up, and guess what? So what? Until now.
Well, you have to stand up in your right, no matter what, when you're a victim. But when we stand up too late, after there have been numerous victims created because of our silence, how much of that do we own?
I see what you're saying.
Because as a victim, rather than allow more victims to be created, even as a child, I knew enough to use my voice, and I was not educated.
Where did you get your courage, Flora? You're impregnated by your father. You're forced to marry your first cousin. You finally escaped physically a cultist environment and a city-state, as it were, up in Colorado City, Arizona. And then for years, you worked in the Phoenix area trying to get law enforcement and protection for others that were there. And it was a struggle. Where did you find your courage?
You know, my courage came from the fact that the only thing that could be done to me now that had not been done so far was they could kill me. That's all. The only thing left. And the fact that I was not as in as much danger helping these kids as they were in staying in a situation where they had no rights, no voice, no choice.
Mm-hmm. Tell us about Warren Jeffs.
Warren Jeffs is serving life plus 20 in a prison cell in Texas. However, he is still running a multi-million-dollar cult out of his cell.
That's what we're told.
Because he has rights as a prisoner where we cannot limit what he does. What about the rights to his victims?
Mm-hmm.
The victims still get walked on in order to serve the criminals who victimize them. Today, it is still happening. This is not okay. We have problems in our social service system that are so egregious that it's a nightmare. I have spent the last couple of days just now, trying to get mental health services for someone who put a gun to their head because the domestic violence situation they were in, she could get no help. And they put her in a facility for evaluation, gave her an evaluation over video screen. She didn't score high enough on their number scale for services, so they kicked her out of the facility. Our mental health system is so absolutely backwards and broken that people are begging for help. No one is listening to them. And you want to know why there are people going out shooting people? It's because they're begging for someone to hear their voice and no one is listening to them. The mental health system is so broken. We have got to make some changes.
Now, this example that you just gave us, is this connected with FLDS victims, or are you speaking about victims in general, other abused children not connected with the FLDS cult, or are you speaking in terms of how Warren Jeffs puppeteers from his prison cell?
I am speaking in terms of this young woman is generationally connected to the FLDS.
Oh, boy. So that is your activism, right, Flora, all with regard to victims of FLDS cults?
Not just, she has never lived in the FLDS cult, but her mother had.
Uh-huh.
So,
but by extension, they're victims and or survivors. Yes. Okay.
And this is the nightmare that these families deal with on a daily basis because the help is just not there. The victims are not helped.
Well, you're helping. You're helping.
I'm looking at writing another book about the systemic failure, not only for the victims out of the FLDS, but system-wide.
Now, we're down to about a minute 15, so I want to cycle back to the Me Too movement and have you give us some last words about it. You're very clear that those who allowed some of this to happen until the time is right to speak out of it, allowed other victims to be victimized. So are we seeing a sea change for the better with Me Too or not?
I don't know. I don't know how to even answer that. Here's my stand on this. If you have knowledge that abuse is occurring, if you have knowledge that harm is happening to an individual and you turn around, turn your back on that person and do nothing, you are part owner of that abuse.
We need to leave it there, Flora Jessup. I have admired you for years. I respect you, and I applaud your efforts. I want to have you back and have you speak up again about how you see the future with this movement. Will you come back?
I absolutely will.
Flora Jessup, author and survivor of FLDS cult. She is the author of Church of Lies. Straight ahead, legislating good character. Is that even possible? On Think America. Reason first, then converse.
Welcome back to Think America with Terry Gilberg.
What do you make of Flora Jessup's remarks that the power is within women? I would say that's true of men too, but if the women are the ones who are being victimized, certainly in an FLDS cult, there's power there, but they might not know it. And she somehow got the courage, and she was 25 years ago speaking up, whereas now you've got Me Too movement women, and that goes for some with, some of these powerful men that are coming down. She would say, where were you? Where were you? You needed to speak up 25 years ago or 20 years ago or when the abuse was happening. What do you make of that?
I think she's an amazing woman, and I agree with her. I've always had this issue with the Me Too movement because it seemed to be focused more on, oh, poor me, I'm a victim. As my 92-year-old mother says, Tina, if you're a woman, you're going to be harassed at some point in time. It's how you handle it that makes you a victim or not. And I think Flora's distinction between power and powerlessness, so you've got a child that has no power, they're stuck in a cult, so you can understand why the abuse may continue until somebody comes in and rescues them. But when a person has a choice, like in the case of Gwyneth Paltrow, where she was an adult, she knew what she was doing, and she chose not to run away from that situation or say anything, to me that is a sin of omission, where you just let somebody else be victimized.
Well, in her case, and I kind of have looked into it a little bit, and I think I'm accurate in what I'm about to say. The idea that you're going to sign a business contract at a man's hotel room, she either thought, this is the culture that I want to work in, and I'll get lucky. I don't mean sexually. I mean, I'll get lucky. He'll sign, and then I'll leave, and I'll play dodgeball, and I'll get out of there, and I'll get into my own car, and I'll tell my powerful agents, got it done, got it done. I went into the belly of the beast, but he didn't attack me. Or she was going to lay down, and this is how it's done. And she would say the former. And now she's speaking up more against it. My heart was racing, and she has said that. My heart was racing. I probably shouldn't have gone to his hotel room, but that's how I thought it was. Look, it's a casting couch culture. And when women lay down in the casting couch, whether they should or shouldn't, but they do, they continue on with the casting couch because now you are part of two that is tangoing, as they say, it takes two to tango. I don't know what was in her heart. I don't know what was in her head, but I know she did it because she admitted that she did it.
Right. And again, what Flora said, the more people that stand up, the fewer victims we'll have. That's a very powerful statement to say that. Mm-hmm. That should be, how we market this to women. If you stand up, you have the courage to stand up. You may not make millions of dollars. Okay, well, you'll be able to sleep at night, and you'll know that you stopped someone in their tracks and did not allow it.
That's why the women in Bill Clinton, the Jennifer Flowers and all the rest, they were like Flora, and they got nowhere. Yeah. Whereas the women with Bill Cosby were not like Flora and the women of Bill Clinton, because just now they're talking about, oh, Bill Cosby did this to me a long time ago. Right. Now, I'm not undermining their effort now. Let's be really clear about that. He drugged me. He had sex with me when I was loopy, and I'm going to take him to court. And guess what? Bill Cosby is in deep yogurt and will probably be sentenced in, 2 trials now, right? All right. But in any event, you have these women more like the Bill Cosby women because of the Me Too movement and taking on Harvey Weinstein and Charlie Rose and Matt Lauer and all of that. That's the volcano that's erupting. I always like to say sea change because to get the current going in a different direction takes a lot of power of the sea. But they're not the most courageous. It's courageous when it's happening at the time. But I am sensitive to women who, when it's happening at the time, think, what's the point? I'm never going to get anywhere.
Yeah, it is frustrating. I mean, I personally have been harassed and I have reported it and then it didn't go anywhere. But you manage it. And to Flora's credit, I think she gave a great message that if it happens to you, report it. And if nothing happens, maybe something did and you didn't know. You send out your message and you give an example.
Not only that, her message was, I'm going to keep fighting this to death. That's that distinguishes her courage from others. And she was doing it way back when she was a very young woman. God bless Flora Jessup and all the rest like her. Straight ahead, can you legislate good character? Speaking of good and bad, good and evil. We're on this thread today on Think America. Straight ahead.
Welcome back to Think America with Terry Gilberg.
Netflix is trying to legislate good character, according to one author, on the record setting of their new sci-fi hit series Black Mirror. Now, what does all this mean? They're implementing new anti-harassment training in response to, you know it, the Me Too movement that came close to totally disrupting production of its House of Cards series, of course, with now infamous, I was going to say famous, but I guess he's infamous, Kevin Spacey. Some of the training rules include not looking at anyone for more than 5 seconds. There's no touching for any lengthy period of time. No hugging. If you ask someone out and they say no, you got to live with that. You can't try again. So where's courtship? I mean, I like courtship, but anyway, I digress. You got to stay clear of that person. No means no right away. You have to shout stop if a colleague has been inappropriate, and you must report a colleague who has given anyone unwanted attention. Now that's very nebulous. That's very ambiguous. Maybe an eyebrow raise or a look. Is that unwanted? Who knows? What do we have here, Christine? Sophomoric rules, tyrannical rules, practical rules. Should we have these rules?
In a way, the workplaces are starting to become the parents of these kids, especially these young men who do not know how to treat women.
Because they weren't parented properly, probably.
Yeah, I've seen it in high school. And not that I want a nanny state. That's not what I'm saying. But when you're in the real world, you need to have manners, basic manners and respectfulness. And civility. Workplaces can get extremely familiar. Look at all the affairs that happen at work. You know, there is a need for some rules, and maybe it's just, you know, that orientation day, first day on the job. This is how we operate here. Mm-hmm. You know, just like you get a 15-minute break or whatever at this time of day. This is how we operate here, and you're not getting away with it.
I got to give them credit for at least trying to get new anti-harassment training. Everybody's got to do this now, right? Mm-hmm. Because of the liberal, in fact, base way that many companies have allowed their employees to treat each other. I mean, terrible. What do you say?
I think it's a manifestation of clueless millennials in the workplace handling HR. And to Christine's point, I think HR is going to be mom or dad, where I can just see an employee. He stared at me for 5 seconds, Mom.
But you know what? Wait a minute now. That may be. There may be millennials there, but guess who's on the board of directors? Barack Obama and Susan Rice. So,
there's your answer.
Oh, yes.
And they're not millennials.
And Joe Biden would violate probably all of those rules, including the extensive long-term hugging.
Yes, and the hand on women's shoulders.
Yes.
And the grandpa look from behind, looking at your behind. Anyway, all right. I'm glad it's Ladies' Day today on the show. Change Your Life Technology. Here's one for you. The FDA is now approving the first drug based on compounds found in marijuana. I don't know if you caught that, but earlier this month, the FDA approved the first drug based on compounds found in marijuana. And it's not the compound that you think that gives you the high, the THC. It's another compound, the CBD. You would know a little bit about that, Martina. The decision comes in spite of the fact, and this is just the yin and the yang of our federal government, that the United States Drug Enforcement Agency, the DEA, lists the plant itself as a Schedule I drug still. Okay, now I hope I'm saying this right. Epidiolex, Epidiolex, Epidiolex is a drug made by the British company GW Pharmaceuticals, now marketed to treat 2 forms of childhood epilepsy, severe childhood epilepsy, and these 2 forms, of course, can be fatal. But the drug uses the CBD portion compound from marijuana and not the compound THC that makes you high. Anyway, they put it in a fruit-flavored liquid. It's for children, after all. And it's got the CBD from the plant. It helps alleviate pain, anxiety, nausea. It helps control seizures. It's not altogether clear, according to this medical report, how this portion from marijuana, this CBD, stops the seizures, but it seems to. It does not make the children high, and thus the FDA said, okay, bingo, we're going to prove it. Good use of marijuana?
Excellent use. 80% of the drugs on the market come from plant derivatives, so there you go.
So good part of plants, and God makes our plants, so yay God, right?
I think it's great.
Many activists for marijuana that were for the kids who have seizures, were pushing this. So now they've got their drug. That's it for this edition of Think America. Thank you very much for being on the program, Christine and Tina. I'm Terry Gilbert. You can always find us, thinkamericaradio.com, where we reason first and then converse. We'll see you next time.